Good afternoon, and a warm welcome to the International Press Center. We are glad to see you again, some of the journalists who are with us here in the room, and also welcome to the journalists who have joined us this afternoon on Zoom to follow the briefing. I think normally the local elections in Denmark, we've just discussed it now, might not be necessarily extremely interesting in terms of making big headlines abroad. This year, I think there are two things here that we'll probably learn a bit more about during the briefing. There's a battle for the seat as Lord Mayor in Copenhagen. And of course, with now less than a year away from the national elections, some people would maybe take a chance here to see what they can read out of what's going to happen in Denmark this week towards the elections on Tuesday. So for all of us to get to know a lot more about these matters and also more, Kasper, once again, welcome to the International Press Center.
Thank you.
We really appreciate that you take your time to come here and give an overview of what we can expect for the next week or so. So a big welcome. We'll do it the normal way, that we'll give the floor to Kasper first. I know he's prepared a presentation for us, and then after that there'll be plenty of room to ask questions when we go to the Q&A. We'll try to facilitate both questions here from the room and also from the people on Zoom who can write up their questions in the chat, and we'll grab them from there. But again, Kasper, a warm welcome.
Thank you.
And good to see you again. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. And hello to everyone. And hello to the ones who've been here before. Yeah, it's actually quite exciting times because, this local election is just as Peter said, just 1 year ahead of our national election. And it seems like our government will have a huge blow when it comes to their support locally. And we know for a fact that will influence the next election. Things go hand in hand. So just like national politics influence local politics, it also goes the other way around. So the winners will argue that this is the biggest midterm election we have ever had, and the losers will say that it's of course not important. This is a local election. So I'm sure you can hear both stories on next week. So tomorrow it's the last day for absentee votes. Danes don't vote absentee not a whole lot, about 10% of us do so. It's very much the elderly that do. Otherwise, most people will actually show up on Tuesday between 8 and 8. We have a chance to vote, so it's a 12-hour election day. And then as soon as the bell rings, the election is over and they will start to count. And already I think 8:30ish, we will have the first results for some of the smaller islands. Some of them only have 53 votes to count, so it shouldn't take them that long. So we will quite soon, actually, within 9 o'clock, have some idea where this is going. Also because there's so we will get, of course, all the polling stations in first, and they might be a bit off. But usually what we will see, it's a kind of a national swing. So if, like, the Social Democrat will lose in the first battleground, 2%, 5%, we can see where it's going, right? So even though it will not add up to the final result, it will show the direction of how this is going. So already on election night, we will know the direction of this. And as soon as everything is counted, especially here in Copenhagen, it's a big polling stations. A lot of votes have to be counted, so they will maybe 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock before they finish. And then we'll have the mandates from all municipalities. And in each municipality, they will negotiate their mayor. So we don't elect our mayor directly, right? It's indirectly elected. So it's basically a negotiation that happens. Some of it is already happening now because, of course, they're trying to make pre-deals with everyone. If this happened, we will go this way and so forth. So there's really a lot of things going on the municipality level already. But of course, they don't know the results. In the night between the 18th and Tuesday and Wednesday, they will actually negotiate this. It's quite fascinating to see because you can actually get quite close, both as a journalist and a researcher. You can get really close to these negotiations, and it's not bound by any rules. So basically they can more or less negotiate any way they want, which is a bit messy, and it's not always nice to see because they will sell whatever they can sell to get this mayorship. The point is that these two are in play at one time. So, and then we have to place all the parties on these dimensions, and then it looks again messy. But Danes can actually navigate in this. So these letters doesn't make much sense for outsiders, but these are letters from each party. Those letters are on the ballot. So they will use them on the ballot because Danes have to know them when they go in to vote. So this will be the unity list, the far left, sorry. So they will be left on immigration. They will be more tolerant to immigration. They will be more focused on climate, but they will also believe in a larger state compared to up here where you have like the Danish Democrats or the Danish People's Party. They will be much stricter on immigration. Danish People's Party being a little bit more left than the Danish Democrats. And this is actually from the latest poll we did in the last national election. We've simply asked all the voters to place the parties, and this is where they place them. So it just kind of shows that the Danes are quite able to place these parties in a kind of a functional space. So it's also when they change party, and there's a lot of people doing this these days, they will change to something that is in their neighborhood. They're not jumping across the middle or something like that. There will be small steps kind of. So you also see here Danish, this is the Social Democrat, this is the Danish People's Party. So the distance between these two parties has over time becoming smaller and smaller because the Social Democrats have been moving in this direction, more strict on immigration, whereas the Danish People's Party has been moving in that direction. So at the moment, they're actually somewhat close compared to previously where they were more divided. So a voter, I mean, going from the Social Democrat to the Danish People's Party is not as big shift than it used to be. So this will be what the Danes are bringing into the voting booth, and they have to kind of be aware of all these parties. But this is just the parties that usually runs in all municipalities. Then we have to add on all the local parties. And in Copenhagen, there is 24 parties running this time. Of course, that's a mess again. Most of them will never have a chance to get in, but they will be on the ballot. The ballot is truly this long and this wide, 4 columns of names. It is something to kind of grasp, but usually these parties will end up deciding anyway. So, but it's just, it's a lot of candidates out there. Almost 10,000 candidates in the country. These are the two kind of major blocks, what we usually will call the red block and the blue block. And in the municipalities, we usually will see that either the Social Democrat will be the biggest party or the Venstre, the Liberal Party, would be the biggest party. So the coalition will usually be formed within this block or in this block. But usually what happens in the coalitions around the country is that, okay, the Social Democrats are biggest, they have the majority with these, but then they will usually go to these parties and ask them, do you want to be part of this coalition? And they will often say yes, because if they don't say yes, they don't get anything. They don't get any of the chairmanship of the various committees. They might not get some of the board positions. So they will say yes quite easily. And the reason why they ask them is they kind of that tie them up into the politics, right? So if they can make this grand coalition, they can tie them up into politics. So Social Democrats will usually, if they have a chance, they will actually have a larger coalition that is necessary. And we will see that across. And we will also see a lot of kind of weird situations where suddenly, like in some of the municipalities, SF will be the biggest. And then they will start to negotiate with these, plus some of these out here to keep these out of power. So there's a lot of things going on in each municipality where this left and right situation is actually up in the air. They're willing to negotiate, also because it's quite often can be a personal game. They simply don't like the Social Democrats, so they want to keep them out of power, or the Social Democrat has been in power for 100 years, so now it's time for a change, and all the other parties agree on that. So sometimes you see that the smaller parties will kind of go together against the big guy. It could be either the Social Democrats or the Liberals. I'll come back to the mayor formation in a second. This is the latest poll on the aggregate level in the entire country. So Social Democrats up here. So in the last election, combined in all, they got 28%. That's much higher than they are at the moment in the national poll. They're only about 20% in the national polls. They will do much better in the local election simply because they have an organization. They are present in all municipalities. Not all parties are present in all municipalities, but the Social Democrats are. So the Social Democrats will, in this poll, lose 3%, but in Copenhagen they might lose 10%. So it's quite different from local municipalities to local municipality how much they lose. But the point being that the Social Democrat and the Liberals here, they will both, which are part of the national government now, will lose tremendously. And so even though they are at the moment usually the biggest party in most municipalities, either the Social Democrat will be biggest or the Liberals will be biggest, they will both lose. So if they kind of lose that head to be big, it will be you can see how the various coalitions can form differently when they don't have that much votes to kind of play with. So there's a lot of other options down here with parties that are not as big, but they can go together and suddenly they are bigger. Another party that will lose big time is the Conservatives. The Conservatives got a really good local election last time. This time they will likely be cut in half, combined again. And that will mean that they will lose. Last time they got a lot of mayor position, they will lose this time in that game. So the Conservatives will also. Who's the winners then? The Socialist People's Party will gain tremendously. So they will be big. The Liberal Alliance will be very big, be kind of their breakthrough locally. Usually now they are not present in many municipalities. They will be present in almost all of them, or at least 2/3 of them. Inger Støjberg's party, the Danish Democrats, of course, they didn't run the last time, so I guess no matter what they get out of it, they will get a really good election. So what we will see is that the Danish People's Party will be big on Zealand, and we will see that the Danish Democrat will be big in Jutland. So basically, these two right-wing populist parties, they will be strict on immigration, right, and they're strict on. They will tend to have divided the country between them. So if you are in Jutland, you will vote for being a populist, right? You will vote for Inger Støjberg's party, and Zealand you will vote for Morten Messerschmidt and his party. So they basically have divided the country between them, which is interesting to also, if you just map it out, you see it quite clearly in that sense. Okay, what is on the agenda? So remember last time, 2021, where we had the last local election, it was kind of just after COVID, right? So there was still a little bit of COVID in the air, and there was a lot of discussion about health. Now we are back to the usual suspects of issues. So we have school, we have healthcare, and we have elderly care. Those are like number 1, 2, 3. Transport is also big. It's quite interesting to see that that's actually number 1 in Copenhagen at the moment. There's so much talking about parking in Copenhagen and other kinds of transportation issues. So that's number 1 in Copenhagen. If we go a little bit further north to Hillerød, one of the other big municipalities, we also have that transportation is big. So depending on which municipality we go to, there will be different issues on the agenda. There's also some municipalities where there's a discussion about windmills or various solar panels, where it just kind of becomes a referendum against these new projects. So this is the kind of the aggregate voters focus. It makes sense that it's these areas because that's what the municipality do. It's schools, it's healthcare, and it's elderly care. So it's like they're responding quite easily to that, what the municipalities actually are doing. If we look at it in terms of, so there's 98 municipalities, right? 54 of them have school and education as number 1, 32 have elderly care, 8 have, and then there's like these kind of in between. So you have some that is where climate tend to jump the list, or some of the transportation I mentioned. Also Aarhus, it's a little bit like the bigger cities seem to have pushed transportation to the top of the list, whereas most other municipalities, that's kind of the usual discussion about schools and healthcare. Yes. This is the number of mayor from the last time. And so I show you that we almost for certain know that the Social Democrat and the Liberals will lose. Those are the big mayor parties. So 44, or almost half of all the mayors were Social Democrats, and 1/3 of them was Liberals. So even though some of them will almost be cut in half, if you look at what is actually going to happen, it seems like nothing is going to change here. Because what is happening in most municipalities is that you will have a situation where, okay, the Social Democrats have lost, but where have the voters gone? They have gone to the Socialist People's Party, right? So the majority hasn't changed so much. I mean, the Social Democrats are weaker, but they will still be bigger than the Socialist People's Party. So in that negotiation for the mayorship, they will still win. And the same on the other side when it comes to the Liberals. There will be a situation where they have lost a lot, but what they're losing to the Liberal Alliance. The Liberal Alliance is still supporting a conservative Liberal mayor, and so you have the same situation again. So even though they will have a really, really bad election, the story on Wednesday, I'm pretty sure will be Social Democrats will say, we are still the biggest mayor party in Denmark. We are still almost half of all municipalities. The Conservatives might also say, yes, we were cut in half, but we are still in power. And the same story will go for the Liberals. But whereas the Socialist People's Party, they will come out being a really, really big party. Now they will have seats in almost every municipality, but they won't be able to convert that into mayor positions. So they might actually be a little bit disappointed because they are not able to kind of, all these mandates, they're not really to get the power, which is, you have to remember, outside Copenhagen and Aarhus, the bigger cities, right? There's only one full-time politician in the municipality, and that is the mayor. So the mayor is both finance minister and prime minister and are the only full-time employee. All the other politicians are only there half-time or even less than that. Then they're not, so to speak, employed by the municipality. So that it is a really, really important position, the mayor in Danish local elections, because also the agenda setting power, he's the head of the administration. So it's extremely important position. There's also a new thing here. So Denmark was divided into 5 regions. Now we only have 4. So the whole issue is that our hospitals here in Denmark have an issue that it's not the same healthcare you're getting depending on which hospital you go to. If you go to the ones in the cities, everything is fine, great hospitals, great care. But if you go to some of the rural areas, first of all, it's very difficult to get doctors to move there. You know, it's such a big country, it almost takes 2 hours to get all over the place, right? Doctors are extremely reluctant to move, apparently. So it's really been a big issue of having doctors to move just to the western part of Jutland or north, or for that matter, to Lolland here. And so they thought, well, let's make some bigger regions. So what they did is they created this huge region, which is almost half of the population in Denmark. So it's Bornholm, and it's the island down here, and it's the whole of Zealand. That's the new region, which is called Denmark East. And they have cut the number of representatives in this area from 82 to now 47. So what is going to happen, of course, is that people live in cities, right? So 2/3 of the people who are living in the greater Copenhagen area. So basically, they will get more or less all the position in this new region. And what is actually at stake here is that you talk about what should you do with the doctors here, all the ways in the rural areas. So there's a little bit kind of a clash there where you trying to set in a new structure that should handle something, but you haven't really thought about to making sure that there's a geographical representation of the rural areas. And this is the same goes for these regions. These are the same by size, but it's not the same by the number of people. So before there was 41 elected up here, now it's only 25. 41, 31 down here was 31. It's 31 now, it was 41 before. So you have fewer people elected with the same number of people means, of course, you need more votes to get in. It becomes more difficult to get in. Who's the one who loses the first? Is the one who there's a small party. Is the rural areas will have fewer votes. So that will be a discussion in the weeks to come, whether they should have done something when it comes to the geographical representation of these areas. You know the 98 municipalities in Denmark. So these are much bigger than they used to be. There used to be 275. Now there's 98. They have the right to tax, which is quite important. And of course, 75% of the Danish welfare state, the public expenditure, is spent in the municipalities or in the region. So we are the local level and the regional level is the kind of the welfare provider in Denmark. So that's also why it's actually a quite important election. It's in the sense that this is where things are being decided. What we talk about streets, talk about schools, talk about elderly care. This is where things are being decided, and there is quite a lot of differences from municipality to municipality. There is, of course, some minimum standards, but usually there's still a lot of leverage within that standard to kind of have differences. So there's definitely a lot of differences when it comes to how much money they invest in different things. So it is, again, it does matter. So 75% of all public expenditure is spent on the regional and the local level. There's a tax collection, so part of the income tax goes directly to municipality. They decide on how big that taxation should be. And then all the kind of the big healthcare things like schools and social services is on the local level, and the hospitals on the regional level, with a little bit of transportation between the regions and state roads and so forth. So again, it is for Danes, it is a quite important election. Copenhagen, being the big city, is of course interesting. It's also interesting that you have this other municipality in the middle of things, like Frederiksberg. Gerrymandering also happened in Denmark in the 1800s. So that's more conservative stronghold. It's not conservative at the moment, but it's actually Social Democrat being a mayor now. But it's interesting to see how sometimes you draw a municipality line just because of. But it's a big municipality, by far the biggest. This is the 24 parties running. So let's say there's 10 of them that's really serious, that they will get in, and then there is 5 more that is semi-serious, and then there is like parties that are more or less there for fun, like Chaos TV and Hampepartiet. So some of these have really difficulties getting in, of course, because they simply don't have enough votes. But they're on the ballot, and they are campaigning, some of them at least. Yeah, but in the end, because Copenhagen being so big, you need a lot of votes to get in. They won't really matter much. This is the current mayor, Lars Weiss. Lars Weiss is the Social Democrats. Social Democrats have had Copenhagen forever, ever since we have had municipalities. Has been a Social Democratic mayor. And the biggest party in Copenhagen is the Unity List, and has been that also last time. But because of this coalition bargaining, the Social Democrat was able to kind of find a coalition that could not have to give the mayor to the Red Green Alliance last time. What's important here is, of course, that the Social Democrat decided in the middle of this period that the present mayor, Sofie Hestrup, not this guy, he was the one what became mayor last time, became minister, and they took another minister, Pernille Rosenkrantz-Theil, who is now running as the head candidate of the Social Democrat here in Copenhagen. So she came from national politics and became this person to run it at the local level. The Social Democrats have been doing that for the last 20 years, more or less, taking some prominent Social Democrat and putting them in head of Copenhagen, because for the Social Democrats nationally, it's so important, it's so symbolic to be able to say, I run the capital. And it's a recipe that had been successful 3 times before. And they thought that, well, we're going to do it one more time. So they took Pernille and made her mayor. He's kind of just like the substitute waiting. So he's just, he will not be mayor after this election. It will either be Pernille or someone else. So Pernille is going for the mayorship now. But the campaign from the Social Democrat with Pernille in charge has been very difficult. She came in being quite kind of eager to say, well, either you're with me or you're not. And coming into a municipality where things are usually much more pragmatic and we will find a way, she started out coming up with a lot of really bold, ambitious projects and ideas. So I think, I forget the precise order of this, but she started out, let's say, with the school district, changing the school district, because the issue is that in some school district in Copenhagen, it's mainly white, rich kids, and others are definitely the opposite. So the way to solve it is to draw the different lines around the schools. Of course, what happened, all the parents got really mad about that. That's something when some of the most, if you really want to piss off parents, tell them that you can't have your child go to the specific school they want to. So I'm sure it actually was solving a problem that are there, but she just made a lot of parents angry. Okay, so that was the first one. The next one was that she wanted to have more parking space in Copenhagen, and okay, then she kind of half of the city was like annoyed by that. Then she came up with the idea of free kindergarten. Okay, and everybody was like, that sounds good. Yeah, and then we have to find the money in the administration. So the whole city hall and all the employees at city hall got really annoyed because they were basically going to get fired if her thing was going through. So she came up with all these very ambitious projects and basically made enemies all over. And that has been extremely difficult for her to. So at the city hall, they are sitting really hoping that it's not going to happen. And the other parties are saying, oh no, I hope not going to happen. So it's really difficult to see how she's maneuvering in this space between the parties because she's been so keen on her campaign, being so strong in the campaign, which have stepped on so many toes. I mean, the other parties has basically not said anything. They just have let her perform her thing. And so top of my head, I can't really even mention 5 things from the other parties. I can just mention the one she came out with because it came out so strong. So in Copenhagen, there's a little bit of different agenda for the voters. Transportation, they're basically talking about parking space here in Copenhagen. I was giving a talk to the international students yesterday, and they asked me, so the most important problem is parking in Copenhagen. And I was like, yeah, that's what the voters are saying. And I was like, yeah, but what about all these kind of housing and all these other things, which was for many I would think to be higher in the kind of the hierarchy of things that is important. But it seems like the Copenhageners are in that place where they are pushing for climate and transportation on top of the agenda. Some would say that it's because that these other things seem maybe to be working okay. So now we will focus on different things, right? But it's interesting to see how the city's priorities have changed over the years, where just a few years ago, schools and daycare was like number one by far. Now there's certainly new issues coming up. But it's a city that has changed tremendously. So many more academic, young families, left-leaning compared to what it used to be just a few years ago. Okay, so this negotiation, you can go into the Copenhagen, the municipality, the website, and see what they're actually negotiating. So first of all, they're negotiating the mayor. The mayor is, of course, the top priority. Underneath the mayor, there is 7 junior mayors. Those positions are also, so there will be mayor from the technical department, the kinder department, the culture department, and so forth. They are also full-time positions. So it's quite important that a party will get one of those because it will keep them a platform for the next election, right? So they were really keen to get that if they don't get there. So the mayor will need to have a majority. And so that will be that coalition that can form the majority. But the things are really getting complicated because it's not just these positions, it's also who will be the board member of the harbor, and who will be board member of the metro company, and who will be board member of all these municipalities where the local government have a say, and that's a lot of companies. And all these positions are usually paid quite well. So, okay, maybe I can't become mayor, but if I get 2 board positions, that's actually 700,000 kroner to get those board positions. So sometimes parties are willing to trade here. So, okay, I don't get the junior mayorship, but I will get those 2 board positions. And that's all up in the air on election night, which make it extremely messy. There's been 2 recent polls I want to show you. One from the Constructive Institute in Aarhus, which Opinion have done, and one Megafon have done. they're showing the same direction. Also, the ones I showed you initially, that the Social Democrats are losing and the Liberals are losing and the SF are winning, and the Liberal Alliance are winning too, also here in Copenhagen. But what is interesting here is if you start to add these numbers up and see where the majority is going, in this one, even if you keep these small numbers in, which will be part of it, there's actually the dark red majority is there. So the Red Green Alliance with the Socialist People's Party and the Alternative have a majority. That means that they can basically just sit in a dark room and decide. So they can decide on the mayor, of course, and then because they're so big, they will also have a big say on all these junior ministers. They can't keep all of them out, all the other parties out of these junior mayorships, but at least they can take a lot of them for themselves. This one shows the same thing, but it's not a majority, it's 49%. So it's like very, very close. And these small parties will not get in, so you have to move those from the calculation and recalculate that, and that means that comes to a majority anyway. So it seems very likely that there will be a majority in Copenhagen, a really dark red majority. These parties over here, let's talk about the Liberal Alliance. So the Liberal Alliance will say, okay, if I can support that dark red coalition, even though it's like way political, another place where Liberal Alliance is standing, they will be part of that negotiation, and then they can win a junior mayorship. So many of these smaller parties have a big incentive to jump into the coalition and try to be part of it. So and that's also mean that the Social Democrats will have, if they don't have a majority, I mean, they're actually put on a side, and then it will be up to the Socialist People Party and the Red Green Alliance to figure out who they will invite in on these extra mayorship. And everything like this will happen the night to Wednesday, basically. Sometimes some municipalities will take a little bit longer, but most of them mostly will be decided on the next day. They will not go to bed until they actually have settled this. Okay. No, I'll skip it. I will stop here. This is about Copenhagen. If you have more specific questions to how this is done, I'm happy to share it with you. It is a bit complicated, and because it's not bound by any laws, again, they can just do basically whatever they want. So it is a very messy game, but it's also a bit fascinating looking at it from the outside, at least. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kasper. That was local politics in 30 minutes. Well done. I think we still have time until 3:30, roughly. So if there are any questions from the room, we'll open up, and I could kindly ask you to introduce yourself and then go ahead with your questions. I think Steffen first.
Hi, Kasper. My name is Steffen Trum from the German news agency DPA. First, thanks for the presentation. It's very interesting for us to understand the little or the less big politics of Denmark. Speaking about big politics, I often wonder that Denmark at the moment has the EU chairmanship and is trying to push for more support for Ukraine, stricter rules on migration, a lot of like national/international topics. While when I saw your chart with what topics are most important for the people in the actually municipalities. For example, I don't see migration there. I don't know if it's part of integration, but it's like very low. How are big politics playing into these local election? And if I may add a second layer of that question, Mette Frederiksen is on the one hand a very foreign politics focused politician, but on the other hand, she tries to be in every municipality at the moment. At least when you follow her Instagram, it's like she's everywhere. Is that actually of help for the Social Democratic candidates? Or is that they silently say, like, please go away, you are just like, we're losing votes thanks to you, Mette?
Good questions. So the first one about the agenda. So here the voters are being asked what is important for them in local politics. And immigration and national issues are not a local agenda. And municipalities don't do foreign politics, of course. They don't do foreign policy, don't do police, don't do law and stuff. And immigration, when it comes to what the immigration policy of Denmark should be, is not a local matter. They only implement things like they will have a place where the refugees might be gathered in their municipality, so to speak. That's where it can kind of be a local issue, but otherwise it's not. So in Denmark, there's been a lot of course, as elsewhere, about the situation in Israel, and that has played in a little bit on local elections, especially here in Copenhagen and Aarhus, where we have seen that some of the candidates are trying to take the issue of Gaza into the local election, but it's not really something the municipality can do something about, so it's kind of a symbolic thing. But the way national politics really influence local policies is basically the first slide I showed. So this slide here, where we ask people what are they going to vote at the local election, we can see that half of this is basically what happened at the national level. So let's say that Mette Frederiksen, at the moment, she might be losing 7 points or so at the national level. Half of that will spill over to the local level. So if she's at the moment going from 27 to around 20 points at national level, so half of that will spill directly into this graph. This is where we see, so there's definitely, so if Mette would have been more popular at the national level, she would have had that graph showing differently. She would have gone increased her support, not decreasing her support. And that goes for all the parties, that national politics are extremely influential when it comes to local. So even though, if a mayor can kind of stop that headwind or tailwind from the national level, it should be a very small municipality in the countryside, and the party should have the mayorship and say, well, this is not about, and try to kind of screen them off from these national issues. So we see that once in a while, that Mette Frederiksen is definitely not invited. You're right, at the moment she seems to be quite eager to be quite a few places, but it also, if you really go into the details, the places she goes to is the places where she's most likely to win. So she's not going, and also, I mean, of course she supported Pernille, but yeah, but again, she's not been like standing down here at the Strøget and giving out roses. I haven't seen it. So she would be going to Holbæk, where there's a stronghold of Social Democrats, a really strong young mayor. Of course, she's there. And so I've seen much more that she's actually going to places where she thinks she can win and she can help. And it's also a bit of a tricky situation that the mayor cannot really say no if the prime minister is coming. So stay away. I mean, it seemed kind of going hand in hand. If she's not welcome, she would not ask to be invited. But you're right. She's trying to do her best, but it can actually, because Social Democrats are losing, why should I, if I was a mayor, Social Democratic mayor, why should I invite that kind of defeat into my municipality? So there's definitely some reasoning there from the local mayors say, no, thank you, don't have to come all the way over here. We're also very busy and blah, blah. So there's definitely also that. But now she's driving around the countryside with the Minister of Education, which is the most popular minister, and trying to kind of so that's but there's definitely a game going there with who should be come and who should But it gives them if the prime minister is coming to almost any municipality, it's also give you a few headlines in the local media. So there's kind of a where should I go? No, should I invite her? Shouldn't I? And so forth.
Thank you. Before we go back to the room again, we've got Noah Haynes with us on Zoom, and he's asking, again, the Social Democrats have recently been talking about increasing parking spaces and removing, for example, shared car spaces. Could this be an attempt to attract more voters from the right-wing bloc?
I'm sure that's what she's thinking, but the point is that there's not many of those left in Copenhagen anymore. So, I mean, there's not that many votes to get. So basically, I think the whole parking issue in Copenhagen is difficult. On one hand, it's quite cheap if you have a parking license to park, but there's not enough room for these cars. And they have had issues. Should they build more, and what should they do? I mean, the solution is not there yet. If you build more, you also invite more cars in. So it's kind of a whole trade-off. But she's definitely trying to soften that policy and putting some edge to the Socialist People's Party and the Red Green Alliance with her suggestions. And it's definitely something that is easier to get with the right than it is with the two other parties on the left. So it seems like the only way she can win is actually to become friends with the Conservative, the Liberals, and the Liberal Alliance. That's the only way she can win. And also kind of looking at to national politics, where the Social Democrat has also worked with the Liberals. That's the kind of the mission I think she's aiming for if she should succeed as a mayor in Copenhagen.
Thanks. And again, we'll just call out for questions in the chat before I go back and check that. We'll take a couple more in here. We'll go to Staffan first, and then Anuka.
Thank you. My name is Staffan Dalev. I'm a Swedish freelancer. Also work for some European outlets. Going to Tuesday evening, will there be exit polls?
No.
Good. Because I was going to ask you, all those exit polls and prognosis we've seen in national elections have been, as I recall it, rather untrustworthy.
That's not correct. That has actually been very trustworthy.
Okay.
There's one example of something really bad, but that's now 20 years ago. So
All
don't mention the war. But
okay.
it will not. I mean, it's simply too difficult, too expensive to do it at local level, because it costs just as much as doing a local exit poll as it would cost to do a national one for a national election. So I haven't heard about any news outlet that would do exit polls.
Okay.
And also because it will be so quickly, we will get real results. I think the media are quite keen on focusing on these real results, and also actually not trying to make this graph here, because this is just adding all the municipalities together, and for most they will say, well, this is not what we are voting for. We are voting for whatever happening outside and this municipality and this municipality, but this will be the story that the national government is taking with them. So I think it will be interesting, even though it won't be a focus.
But given what you said now and also before, at what time, Tuesday or maybe Wednesday or Thursday, are you prepared to draw some more general conclusions?
I think we will already be able to draw a quite firm general conclusion in the evening around midnight, maybe 1 o'clock, when it comes to this picture. So usually what happens is that they will keep on counting the party vote until they are finished. And so I think, but you have to remember they have to count 2 votes, both the regional and the local, so they have to do both. So, but 1 o'clock they should be finished. And some of the municipalities, they actually just, if it's a small polling station, they will also count the personal votes, but otherwise they will come in the next day and then they will count the personal vote the next day. So, and that will take all day. So on Wednesday evening, you will also have all the local votes. So the election is almost for certain all over the place. They finish counting on Wednesday evening or 6 o'clock, something like that, no later than that.
Thanks, Kasper. Thanks, Staffan. And another question?
Annukka Oksanen, I'm a Finnish freelancer. How do you explain this? It seems that there's even more turn to the left in Copenhagen. I mean, it's very left-wing.
True.
And yes, and I was thinking that is Copenhagen now coming the New York of the Nordic countries with this wing?
I thought it was Paris, but okay.
Yes.
Yeah. It used to be Paris, but now it's, I guess, in New York. I can see the parallel. What has happened, I don't know. What has happened in Copenhagen is basically, so the Social Democrats, which have been in power, has been able to renovate the city, bigger apartments. I mean, the housing has skyrocketed, so it's so expensive to live here. So what have happened is, of course, the one with the jobs that can't pay that much, they can't afford to live in Copenhagen anymore. Most of them have moved out to the suburbs, and some even further away than Copenhagen. So part of it is simply that the demographics of Copenhagen have changed, and it's happened over the last maybe 20 years or so, and what it has 25 maybe. So, but what has happened is that now we have more young people, a lot of students coming, of course, but also young parents. But it's not young parents it's academic parents or people that have high-paying jobs living in Copenhagen, often with many with kids. Usually, those families tended to leave Copenhagen when they got kids, and then moved up. But now they're staying, and that has meant that Copenhagen is richer than ever in terms of. So they have been able to lower the tax rate actually several times over the last decade or so. So it's basically not the same population as it used to be. And that population being young academics with children, they are value-based left. So they are much focused on climate, on less strict on immigration, much more open, much more tolerant in terms of kind of a global outlook. And that has definitely changed Copenhagen. Yes and no. I mean, it's not socialism as you would say when it comes to bigger state. That's not the socialism. It's socialism that are value left. It's at the same time the Social Democrats has also changed, right? So whereas the population have moved on my graph from before have moved down. So basically the voters in Copenhagen have moved down here. The Social Democrats have moved up here. So basically they're losing votes simply because both things are moving in opposite directions. And yeah, that's an issue, of course. Voters would like to vote for something they agree with, not something that is. So it's so we see it also on national level from election to election that Social Democrats are losing votes because their big base is retired folks, usually 70 plus years old, and they don't live forever. But the young people that comes in, they will vote Social Democrat maybe 10%, but they have an idea that they're supposed to be 20%. Have to remember the ones leaving. So the ones born in 68, that generation there is the most stable Social Democratic generation. In the last election, 44% of them voted for the Social Democrats, but they are leaving.
68.
Yeah, the whole kind of, we usually call them the generation of 68. So there's the one being young between 65 and 75, right? So that generation is the backbone of the Social Democratic Party in Denmark. But these folks are getting very close to 80 years old now. And soon they will not be around. And whereas the young people coming in the other end is simply not even close to being Social Democrats. They are either, if there's a young academic woman, she will be Socialist People's Party usually, or maybe the Social Liberals, definitely be down here somewhere. A male might be up here with the Liberal Party, but not in this area. So it's you know the story about that the Social Democrats have been moving up here because they wanted to make sure that decisive vote among the Danish People's Party has to be in their end. So I mean they've been they won elections on this by moving up here and taking votes here, but they're losing in the other end, and that is definitely being played out in Copenhagen very clearly in this election.
Thank you, Kasper. We've got Reuters, the news agency, online this afternoon, and again also focusing a little bit on the democracy of also the Social Democrats and what happens in the cities. But Louise here, she's asking, I mean, it follows on to what you've explained, but maybe two questions. I'll try to see if I can refer loyally. What does the developments in Copenhagen, does that say anything about the rest of Denmark, or is the capital kind of detaching itself? And also in I don't know if you know this, but in an international perspective, is it a trend to see capital cities kind of detaching themselves from the rest of nations? Does it make sense?
Yes, indeed. I think the question is good also in the sense it is true that we are seeing bigger cities tend to the whole division between the urban areas and the rural area is bigger than ever. So we see a tendency that young women, they want to educate themselves early. They are moving to the cities, 19, 20 years old. The men are staying at home in the rural areas, then they become mechanics, right? Whereas the women will tend to get higher education. And that change is on education, is on gender, it's on geography. So all these dividing lines are kind of supporting each other. So if we add them up, we just see that young women, young men are more different than ever. So you have the young men staying in the rural areas, young women in the capital traveling, educating themselves, and that trend is something that is coming slowly, but it's just if I don't have the graph with me right now, but if you graph it out, you can just see that it's kind of it's a big divide, and it's coming bigger and bigger. Every election is just 1-2% more. So it's definitely an issue that this divide is happening. So it's not just geography, it's not just city, rural, it's also on education and gender and age.
And then she's also asking about just looking at it, maybe from people abroad that know a little bit about Copenhagen, surprisingly seeing transportation being the main concern in Copenhagen. Is it?
Sorry.
What do you think? What can you say about it?
Yeah, but as I said during the presentation, when I presented this yesterday from the exchange student at Copenhagen University, they were also like, but it's housing. It's housing. It's not transport. I mean, they can ride their bikes anywhere. I mean, and how you make transportation a big issue. And I was like, I couldn't really see their point. I think a little bit that there's a tendency that if things are going okay, it kind of being pushed down to the agenda. It has to be. So all the politicians here agree we should have the best daycare in the world. We should have the best health system in the world. But on transportation, there are clear divisions. Someone more parking spaces, someone less parking spaces. And there's like sometimes in a campaign, the really big campaign issues is where there are differences between parties. And there actually are differences here. So I think that's also how the voters react. So they can't really decide to vote for the party with the best healthcare because they're basically all talking about the best healthcare. But when it comes to parking, they can see differences. And also a little bit about some of the climate issue with the Lynetteholmen, this island they're building outside Copenhagen. There's a big climate discussion there. There you can also see differences. So it's sometimes the bigger issues are kind of being lost in this because parties tend to agree a little bit too much.
Thanks a lot. I think we'll go to Camille for a question.
Thank you. I'm with the International News Agency AFP, and my question is about the future of Mette Frederiksen, because if the Social Democrats lose the election on a national level, how will our position be for the upcoming elections? Is it going to fragilize her a lot, or will she run again?
This election will not matter. I mean, she is firm going into the next election as prime minister. So this election will not change her idea of running as prime minister next time. She will have more difficulties because she will bring in a narrative that is not as strong as it could have been. If she loses the next election, and lose here means not becoming prime minister. I mean, you can also she will still lose votes, but if you just become prime minister, she will be happy again. So it's all about keeping the prime minister seat. If she don't get that prime minister seat and somebody else become prime minister, she will resign, I think, very, very quickly. Probably even on election night, if that's what the results are showing. And she, for some time, of course, has been looking for new jobs. She's been trying, and I think that will be definitely intensified if this is what the election looked like. But she decide when we will have the election. It's not on a fixed date. So, and there's a lot of tax cut, so a lot of various tariffs that are being lowered for Danes in the spring. So basically, we will all have a lot more money in the spring. We can actually see it on our paycheck checks, and I think she and the government is hoping that mean that the Danes hopefully will go into the election campaign on a happy note. We have more money than ever. But the polls are not showing that yet. But she, of course, she's hoping that that will be the case. So she probably have to wait a little bit before she calls the election, because this have to work, right? So it could either be early summer or just after the summer. She can wait until October to call it. So there's still time. But of course, the longer she wait, the more everybody knows it's coming. So she kind of loses her advantage by deciding. So there's a little bit, how long can she actually wait, giving it the focus. But I think it would be difficult for her to stay in parliament and head up the Social Democrat if she's not prime minister after the next election.
Thank you, Kasper. I think we're getting close to 3:30 here in Copenhagen. So big thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks again for coming. And I think it just rests with us to wish you a good election week. I'm sure from now on, you're going to be busy, and also a good election day.
You too.
And to all of you who joined us on Zoom, thanks again. We'll see you soon. And to the journalists in the room, also thanks to you. Have a nice evening.